Okay, today we're going to show you guys how to remove the lift pump and replace it on a 12 valve 5.9 Cummins diesel. It's a fairly common problem that these pumps fail. There's little check valves inside them and they tend to deteriorate over time. This truck here has 400,000 kilometers on it, and as well a waste vegetable oil conversion, so I imagine that doesn't help the seals that are internally in the pump. So you can see there's the fuel transfer pump, or what they call the lift pump, and in yellow there's a little line that runs from the transfer pump down to the fuel heater and pre-filter. And I want to show you guys what goes wrong with those as well, and we're actually going to delete the fuel heater because they're useless and they have problems, and I'll show you what problems they have. So this is right from the Chrysler repair manual, and it's a little easier to see what I'm doing by giving you a picture of this. And if you look at the vehicle, this is the driver's side. Right down in between the turbo tube here and the brake booster is where the fuel transfer pump or lift pump is. Now, it's very difficult to get at it from here. I found it easier to just remove the left inner skirt from the truck and just go right in through the opening that's in here. And I'll just bring back this light here and you can see where the pump would be through that opening down in there. And you can see that I've already removed it. There's just two 10mm bolts holding it in, kind of like an old mechanical fuel pump on a Chevy. And I've just removed it, and I've also taken out the fuel heater as well at the same time. I'm not going to go through the boring process of taking two 10mm bolts out and disconnecting the line, but here's what the transfer pump looks like. And you can see that on the 96 it has the fuel heater attached to it, and the two 10mm bolts. There's one there and one over there, and then there's a bracket that attaches, and I've already cleaned this up a little bit. But one of the other weak points on these 12 valve Cummins diesels over the years is this fuel line that runs from the fuel heater to the transfer pump deteriorates, and you can see that this one's all cracked. And as soon as they get cracked like that, what they'll do is they'll bleed air back through them, and you can actually see a crack in here. And eventually you go from, I think it's about 35 pounds pressure that this transfer pump pumps up to the main pump, down to 5 or 10, and then all of a sudden the vehicle doesn't start in the morning. So it pulls air in through the pump here. This is the output here, back up to the fuel filter. And you can see that it's deteriorated as well right in here. So we're going to change this lift pump. Again, it's weak as well, I know that. I've actually tested this one out of the vehicle already, and it pumps very little, and it also leaks out the hole here and out the boot in the bottom here. It was leaking quite bad. So at 400,000 kilometers, I'm going to change it out. These pumps are only $99, brand new off of eBay. Probably $200 to $300 from a parts store and $500 from your Chrysler dealer. So just go to eBay and get one. And we're going to do the delete for the fuel heater as well. Okay, so we can just put that in the vise. Cleaned up the gasket area for when I put this thing back in. It's very simple at this point. You just take a 17mm wrench. You can loosen that off, spin the pre-filter off, and then the heater itself, you just get an 8mm wrench, undo it. Once that's undone, you can just remove this by hand. And this is just sort of a little secondary tube that the fuel comes through, and we're going to delete that anyway. So we're going to take this right off and disconnect it. 1 second. Again, I'm trying to hold the camera and do the job at the same time. So now you can see there's your fuel heater, and you can see this one has lots of miles on it, and there's lots of grunge on it. But I'm going to show you how you can test this thing, and these tend to burn out, and I can see that this one's burned out because you can see the burn marks actually right here. The plastic's all melted inside of it where the rivets were. And this is a major source of an air leak for the fuel pump as well. So I'll show you how I test these. And again, I'm going to try to hold the camera and do it all at the same time. So all I do is put an air line into the, see, I've got my air line here, into one of the male connectors that's on the heater. And if I submerge that in some water, and I'm going to try to do this all at once, but blow air into the male connector, and you'll see that the air is actually coming out in the center. So this one had a major air leak through the pin connector where it burned out the grid element inside, and it actually sucks air into to the point where this vehicle was really hard starting in the morning. So we're going to delete this completely. It was only put on for a couple of years, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, like 94, 95, 96 Ram diesels, and we're going to get rid of it completely. So I'm going to take the pre-filter screen and clean it. There's a little tiny 17 or a small 17 millimeter nut there. Just remove the 17 millimeter nut. The pre-filter comes out. Maybe I'll quickly show you guys that. There's not a lot on YouTube as far as how to do this properly. So, it's not. I'll just use our adjustable wrench. Loosen this nut off. And you can see that that's basically it. You'll put this in a pair of pliers, and then just remove that nut. Clean the screen out. Put it back in. Tighten this back up a little bit. And if you're lucky, like I was, the gasket was actually okay on this one. You can't buy the gasket separate. You have to buy the whole filter kit. There is part numbers. You can find that filter kit on some of the Dodge truck forums. I can't remember the part number. But what we're going to do is just take the center section out that was in here, that was on the heater, and remove it. So we've completely removed the heating element. And you can see the gasket's okay on this one. I've cleaned up the gasket surface area here. And we'll just spin this back on and get our 17 millimeter. Put it back on fairly tight. I'm going to put the camera down here because I'm going to support it. I don't want to break this bracket because it's just pot metal. So I'm going to support it as I tighten it. So I'll try to put the camera down there. There we go. I'll make that fairly tight because the gasket is old. We're going to change the larger fuel line that was damaged. I haven't got it yet. It's a dealer only item. I guess a guy could get some hydraulic hose and loop it around and back into the new transfer pump. But in my case, what I'm going to do is just wait for the OEM. I think the OEM part is about $8 or $10, so it's not that much. So really, there's not a whole lot to doing this delete. Pretty much anybody that has a few hand tools can do it. And I'll just remove this from the vise now. I'm going to go back out. I've got a new fuel pump. The only thing I don't have today is actually the the fuel line that runs from the transfer pump over to the pre-filter here. So here we are back outside. It's a March day. It's cold here in Vancouver. Spring isn't quite here yet. Got fresh snow in the mountains. So back out at the truck, and I'll show you guys the new part. So here's my new Carter transfer pump. It will go on there with two gaskets, one in the front, one in the back. You can see that. I'll clean up the area. I'll put a little bit of Permatex gray on that because I don't like these paper gaskets. They tend to weep and leak engine oil. So I'll seal them with a little bit of Permatex gray silicone, not clear silicones or anything like that, because I don't like to use those. And we'll put this back in. There's really nothing more to it than putting it back in, hooking the lines up, so I'm not going to bore you with that kind of stuff. The only other thing that I've had a problem with in the past is because the transfer pump actually has a spring-loaded piece that comes out here for the pumping action that runs off the cam lobe inside the engine. Quite often, if the cam lobe's on its high point, you'll have a hard time putting this in and starting the two 10mm bolts. You can just turn the motor over 180 degrees, get the cam lobe on the low side, and you can then easily install this. Or people have changed those two 10mm bolts, which look like this. They're 10mm head bolts, sorry, they're 8mm bolts. You can change those over to studs. So if you put a fairly long stud in here, then you don't have to worry about the pintle here at all. You can just put it in and put your nuts on and tighten up the nuts. Really, guys, there's not a whole lot more to it. Again, there's not a whole lot of room to do the job from this side. Some guys can do it, some guys don't. I do it from here as well as through the wheel well. It just seems to be a natural place to do it. You can get it the 10mm bolts that way with a long extension. And other than that, just look at all your fuel lines. There's a few soft fuel lines that run in behind the fuel filter that you may want to take a look at and see if they're deteriorated as well. And while you're doing the job, you might as well just change them. Other than that, I've checked the fuel shutoff solenoid on this one. It works well, and there's a few videos on that. You can see here's the waste vegetable oil kit that I made up for this truck. Well, it's not really a kit, it was stuff that I had laying around the shop. But you can see that there's a heater that runs off of the coolant lines, and 3 solenoids. And my good old reliable truck here, I made up some fuel tanks so that I could still fit the camper in. It's looking pretty ratty, but it seems to work pretty good. Quite a few gallons. I can go probably about 1,600 kilometers between these two tanks and the main fuel tank without a fill. So I can do a pretty good vacation. Okay, guys, that's it, and hope you learned something. Don't pay for this job if you don't have to. It's not that difficult. I'd say an hour and a half, maybe 2.5 hours for someone that's fairly unskilled and hasn't done this job before, and I'd say you could probably do this job in 1 to 1.5 hours if you if you're fairly handy with tools. The only one, other thing is there is a fuel line that runs up from the transfer pump right here. When this is in, it goes up and runs into the fuel filter. You can see there's the fuel filter right there. I disconnected the banjo fitting there at the back and removed that entire fuel line with the transfer pump when this one came out, because the line was stuck to the actual nut, and I don't want the nut to turn on the pipe and wreck the pipe just like a brake line. So I took the pipe out, with it, so it was no problem. Alright, and I will just put it all back in, and I'm sure this truck will go another couple 100,000 kilometers. Okay, over.